Well, welcome again to the fun and mentals of real estate. We have a question of the day. What is it?
What proves that I own my home?
Oh,
What is the documentation? What is the proof that I own my home?
Oh, okay. We're going to talk about title today. How
Title,
fun
yes.
that going to be? Oh my
Yes.
goodness. I'm Angela Dillmon here with Keller Williams Realty Chesterfield, and this is my wealth building partner,
Glen Calvin at Gill Mortgage.
Okay, we are here to help you live your dream lifestyle,
Build wealth
and leave legacies
Yes.
that matter, because
Yes.
it does matter.
And we talk about those
Right.
legacies. We talk about how that property or that wealth is passed on.
That's
So when
right.
we're talking about the title today, we're going to
Mm-hmm.
look kind of backwards on how it's passed on.
Oh yeah, this
Yeah.
is very important part. So when we talk about the wedding planning, we're planning a wedding. We got engaged because we got a contract on a house, right? So we're liking this to planning the wedding, right? And so again, Glenn, the best man. I'm your
Yes.
maid of honor, right? But you have bridesmaids and groomsmen, and you have parents, and you
And
have all kinds
you
of
know what else
people
you
who are
have?
going to jump in.
You have a guest book.
Oh, you have a guest book. Oh, there
So
you
you
go.
have a written record of everybody that attended.
Yeah, there you go. So now, this is one of your, I guess, bridesmaids. Really, it's title company partner in this. And so, what's the role of the title company in this?
That's a great
whole deal?
question. So the title company is, I always say they act as a clearinghouse. So you're going to buy a home from somebody else. They've got a loan. They've got a warranty deed. The title company is going to take the money from the lender. They're going to pay off the loan. They're also going to make sure that the person you're buying the house from has a right to sell it, has owned it correctly, that the way that they bought it and the person they bought it from, we call it the chain of title, that's all been legal.
All the
and
way
right.
back.
All the way back to the beginning. Yeah, I
Right.
looked up one in Lamity, Missouri. My great-great-great-grandfather, Commodore Perry Calvin, was the first owner of that property. It was a Spanish land grant.
Wow.
So you could go to Franklin County. It was so exciting. So when the piece of property is right by you, when that passed down from owner to owner, it started with Commodore, I always say that, Perry Calvin, my
Isn't
great-great-great-great-grandfather. Yeah, it was like the 1820s, something like that, right? As
And
Missouri's a state.
one of the reasons this is so important, especially here in Missouri, is that Missouri's a marital state.
It is, yeah. So
And then this is really surprising to most people because you're like, hey, I bought my house by myself. What do you mean my spouse owns?
yes,
Right,
once she
I
got
have
married,
50%.
she got
What are you
right.
talking about? They don't need to sign. I'm the one who bought it. I'm the only one on title. Missouri doesn't care. Missouri says that when you marry someone,
They own half.
automatically have 50% interest in all your assets, not just your house.
Right.
It's
So-
all the rest of everything else you own.
The lender is going to order that title insurance policy as soon as they get the contract.
Yeah, so they're going to go about searching. They're going to go look at the record,
Right.
and if the seller is going to get a questionnaire from the title company, and they're going to ask them, "Did you get married?
Did you get married?
Well,
Yeah.
since you own the property,
done
did
any
you
work
get
on the
divorced?
property?
Did you get divorced since
Right.
you own the property? Yeah. Have you done any work in the last 12 months? Why? Because that contractor 6 months from now can say, "Hey, you never paid me," and
Exactly.
file a lien.
Right.
And that can happen after closing. So the seller gets this questionnaire about all these things. Has anyone ever disputed your your ownership? All these things, right? And so it's very important. They do a lot of searching.
They do. They're going to go to the county records.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they're going to start. But they're also look at CaseNet because they're going to know if
Yeah.
anybody involved has any tax liens, any judgments, any
Right.
collection accounts.
Seller
all
and
that.
the buyer.
Yes.
Both parties.
Because
are
they're
gonna
ensuring
research.
that you own that property correctly, and they're giving you an
Mm-hmm.
insurance policy that says you own that property correctly.
Right.
They're also giving the lender an insurance policy.
And they're giving the lender. This is what's important. They're giving the lender an
And
insurance
we're not going to
policy,
make the loan without it.
which means that they want to know that there's no even a future judgment or a present judgment from the buyer that
Well,
could be
if-
attached after closing.
If there is, then that title company is responsible for it. So
That's
that's why they
right.
work so hard
Right.
to make sure, and that's why they do all that research.
So they do the search because they're going to issue at the end of the day an insurance policy.
Right.
And they're going to ensure you that you have clear title, that no one else has a right to the property, and that no one has a right to put a lien on the property saying that you owe them money.
And they're going to give
Okay.
you a copy of the policy, and it's going to show on there that you own the property,
Yeah.
and it's going to be subject to any loans that you would have,
Right.
any, we'll talk about this later, but any easements or any restrictions
Okay,
and covenants by the
let's
HOA.
just talk about this. So when they search title, they're going to look for easements on the property.
Yes.
Okay. They're going to tell you what a survey is going to tell you setbacks, but there's encroachments, easements, variance, setbacks. All this stuff is dependent on the initial title work, because the title work is going to say, hey, somebody has the right to cross your property. Somebody has the right to have their driveway on your property.
Access to a utility.
Access to utilities. A future road could go on somewhere on your property. Like, the title work is going to research more
could be
than just
a well
ownership.
agreement. Could be a well agreement. Could be a shared road.
Could be a shared road. Could be private roads.
There's going to
the
be
HOA can have rights on the property. So the HOA stuff is going to be on that title search. And if you have private roads in a subdivision, there'll be maybe a road agreement for maintenance.
Right, exactly.
That will show on the title. So they're searching a lot more than just ownership record, right? They're searching a lot. Current judgments, all that. So I just had one recently where there was like an erroneous lien. So it was like, what is this lien? It had someone who'd never owned the property. A mortgage company had put a lien on the property because they said, hey, Bobby and Joe got this loan against this property. And they're like, nah, no, they've never owned the property. And so what happened was they had transposed two of the numbers in the address.
Mistake, yeah.
And it actually meant to be lien on a neighbor's property down the street. And so we had to get a hold of the lender.
Takes time,
They had to get a new mortgage recorded against the correct property. And then they had to have a formal written release of the loan against this property. And that came up like maybe just the week before closing, and they had been frantically working on that. And so there's a lot of things that do happen and that come up on title. I would say, what do you think the most common ones are common title snags? Because this is another area where snags can happen.
So a deed of release, meaning you paid off the loan. They sent you a release, but it didn't get filed properly.
Yeah, so
that doesn't happen as often now.
Maybe when the seller bought the property, the previous owner had a loan, and that got paid off at closing. Well, that release doesn't get recorded till after closing from that mortgage company to say, paid full, don't owe me any more money. That's called a release. And it never got recorded. That is really one of the most common ones.
It doesn't happen as much now because we've taken steps to kind of fix that problem. But it did happen a lot in the past.
It does happen quite and this is important. When you buy a property, you'll get this title insurance policy about 6 weeks after closing. Put it in a safe deposit box, because if you go to sell it and they didn't record the seller's loan
you're
release,
insured,
right?
You're
you just say, here's my title insurance policy, and it just smooths everything over, and you can sell without any problem. So this insurance policy, so that's very, very common.
Other things we see, like if it's passed on from an estate, you're buying an estate, we have to make sure that estate, everybody that signs the right document. If somebody bought the property, they're selling it now, but they got married, like we talked about earlier, that could be an issue. A lot of times we'll see the seller they'll get a payoff on his first mortgage, and then they'll get a payoff on his second. Well, he accessed the second mortgage to do some repairs. Now all of a sudden he owes more money. There's all kinds of little things, and none of it's common. It's just more stuff that happens.
You just say more common little snags that come
up. And they need to be, and the sooner, just like everything else, the sooner you can get that title insurance policy, review it, and address any issues.
Right, and they're also going to find out the payoff of the current seller's loan if there is one. And he may owe so much money that by the time he pays his realtor fees and his other things that he needs to pay off, he's not getting enough money. He needs to actually bring money to closing. That's a super important. Now, we don't see that as happen as much often, but I just had one a couple of years ago that had to do that. Even in this rising, appreciating market, it can happen. And so that's a common one too. They have to check that out.
And we're going to meet at that title company, and when we get to the wedding day, the closing day, we're going to actually meet at the title company, and they're going to update that stuff almost to the hour when you close and make sure.
It is very true. And divorces are another one.
Oh, that's a big one.
The seller can be in the middle of a divorce and not have told anyone, and then all of a sudden a divorce decree comes down, and they're like, wait a minute, there's a divorce decree on file. Or there's a separation agreement or whatever, and they're going to find that. That's very common too. It's like, well,
and a lot of times we'll deal with too where common name. That's another one where your name is Joe Smith, and all of a sudden they say, well, there's a $10,000 tax lien against Joe Smith.
And you're like, no,
Different
that's
Joe
not
Smith,
me. And
right.
then you got to prove that it's not you. That's
You don't really.
very
It's not so
common
much that you have to prove it. You're probably just going to sign an affidavit at closing
sign an
saying that's not
affidavit
you. But
that
that
it's
comes
not
up every
you.
once in a while. And then I don't know if we talk about what happens with how the property sits on the ground.
So let's just talk about surveys. That's
Okay,
another thing
yeah.
we want to get to real quick. So the reason we kind of paired title insurance and surveys that
They go hand in hand.
they do
right.
go hand in hand because in a title insurance policy, it's going to insure the lender, but it's not going to insure you for your property boundaries. It will if you get what's called a boundary survey. So there's two types of survey. There's a boundary, go out, stake
Right.
exactly everything.
You can actually find the little iron pins in the
Yeah,
ground.
it'll stake everything out. You can put some GPS markers in there these days, and it'll locate everything exactly: the fences, the retaining walls, the driveway, the house, but an outbuilding, a shed, on a boundary. Everything's gonna be located. On a spot, it's probably not going to locate everything. It's not going to locate everything exactly. Right. And so the title insurance company's like, well, it's nice that you have this spot survey.
And they're a little cheaper.
And actually stay,
right.
and they are cheaper. But title is like, yeah, I can't do anything with that. But if you have the boundary, they're like, hey, if someone disputes that that's your property line, or that that's your wall, or that that's your driveways on your property, they'll insure that.
So I know we don't do it on everyone. So when do you recommend getting the boundary survey?
Well, especially if you're buying acreage, you should always have one. And really, it's a great idea to always have one if you want to put a fence up, if you have a fence.
Adding a pool or a deck, doing anything like that.
If you're going to add anything, you should get a boundary survey.
Well,
and it's better to do it at the time of purchase so you can get this insurance on time out.
But sometimes I think if it's a house that's been passed on, nothing's changed in a while.
Sometimes on these quarter-acre lots,
Right.
the subdivisions and the fences have been there for 30 years. No one seems to care until your neighbor gets one when he buys the house and says your fence is on my property, and then you just say it's not my fence. Like I didn't, obviously it's your fence, it's not my fence. That's kind of how it is. But let's just say you have this boundary survey, and that there's a difference between encroachment, easement, variance, a setback.
Right. So encroachment is somebody they put a driveway and they got 6 inches over in your lot
onto your property,
or
they put the fence up. It's the most common snag here on a survey. Survey snags are, hey, the fence is on the neighbor's property, or the neighbors on the house property that you're trying to buy. You're like, why is the neighbor's fence 6 inches over or 2 feet over sometimes, right? And so there's an encroachment where something you have is over the property line, or something someone else.
And
has
it's not
on
going to
your
kill the
property line.
deal.
No,
you're
there's
probably just
ways
going
to
to
handle.
reach an agreement.
So an encroachment, the way you handle that is if your neighbor is on, let's say, 2 feet on, you can give them an easement to say it's okay to be there. And most people don't make them move it, you know. And let's just say they built a retaining wall on the neighbor's property 6 inches over. The neighbor can give an easement, and they record that. So an easement means you have the right to be on the property to do X, to put a wall, to put a fence, to put electrical lines, gas lines, cable lines.
We actually put a hiking trail through our property, an easement for our neighbors. So it's there. They can hike across the back of by the creek to the...
People can have the right to put a road on your property, especially when you're buying acreage. You see it all the time. It's like, hey, there's an old road easement. Can we get that abandoned? Well, we got to go to the person who it was designed to have, and then they get them to release the easement. So an easement is still your property.
Right.
You own it, but someone has the right to come on it to do something.
So I would say between the title and the realtor, they're going to give you good advice on whether or not you're going to need
But then there's setbacks on this survey. So a setback is, so Josh,
great
Josh
point.
is not here today, but he was telling me about, hey, I have a client and they want to put a pool in the yard, and you're like, this is a beautiful yard. I could put a pool in this yard. And Josh is like, well, maybe. How big of a pool do you want? And they're like, oh, I want a really big pool. So he pulls the survey out because the seller happened to have one, right? And he looked at it, and in every survey, there's a setback.
Right.
So here's the property line. You can't build the house any closer to the front of the property line than 50 feet.
So when the builder developed that
setback.
subdivision, he set up a bunch of rules and regulations and restrictions, and one of the things they all agreed on so that the subdivision would look nice and conform, they put those setbacks in there and said you cannot build, you can plant flowers, you can do this, you can't put a pool, you can't put a concrete patio.
You can't put retaining walls, you can't put a shed, whatever, an outbuilding. And so even the sidelines, the sides of your property and the rear can have a setback. Can't build or put anything closer than Now, a fence you can usually put right on the property line. People don't really care because they can come out and be put back if they ever really need to. But the setbacks really are for anything more substantial usually than a fence. And so you can't get any closer. So he looks at it and he goes, well, the setback's 20 feet. It's usually only 5 or 10, but it could be 25. And so on both sides. So now you've just lost 50 foot to work with your pool, right? And then a pool can't be any closer to a setback than you come in again,
Wow. Yeah.
right? And so by the time he got this measured off from the setbacks, the pool was half the size they wanted.
Wow.
And so if you don't have a survey available when you're purchasing at the time of contract, and you do want to put something substantial,
I don't think if you're
you
going to
should
do
make
that,
it
you'd want to.
contingent.
Right.
You should make contingent on, and an easement could run right through the middle of that yard for the sewer. Sewer lines are huge. These big sewer mains right through the middle of the yard. You can't build a pool over the sewer easement. Sorry, I don't care how deep that sewer is. You're not doing it. So if there's something you want to build on the property, not only is the boundary survey really important, but you probably should make a contingency in your contract for knowing where the easements and setbacks are that you can. And we've done it before.
What you're fortunate is to have this team with you that's going to give you that guidance and talk to you. Because if I'm buying my first house in the city on a tiny little lot, I'm probably not worried about setbacks. I'm not putting a pool in. That house has been there, and it may be good not getting a survey. I'm building a big house out, buying a big house in the county. I want to do a bunch of work to it. I want to put in a fancy swimming pool. Mm-hmm. Then you're going to want to.
Yeah, but you need to I just sold one where the entrance to the driveways is shared, and then the driveway split off.
I've seen that, sure.
But that top part shared. Well, is there a shared road agreement of who's going to maintain it? The lender's going to want to know that.
Exactly.
And so when my nephew bought this house, we actually had to have one done. I called an attorney. I had the agreement wrote up. I had to have the neighbor and the seller sign off and create a permanent shared driveway easement to allow them both to use it in perpetuity, like forever, and then agree to how they're going to maintain it. And you can get by not doing that when you just pay cash for properties, but when you have a lender wants all.
You probably want to
really
do,
a pain.
You'd,
they want to know all kinds of things.
You probably want to do that anyway. So
yeah.
The thing to remember, it is work, just like our wedding analogy, but you get all this so that when you buy the house, you've got this peace of mind, this confidence that nobody's going to knock on your door and say, hey, my cousin sold this house from our estate 20 years ago and she shouldn't have, it really belongs to me. That's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. So
no,
surveys
are important too.
Great information.
Yeah, so we're still planning our wedding.
Yes, we're getting
closer. I know
closer.
that you're a little still excited and maybe still a little nervous.
It's the same emotion.
That's right. So we have some fun and we get excited and we plan.
We are.
And then we have a little mental when it comes to titles and surveys.
We'll
and all
make sure that we know about it. No one is going to bring us some peace. Yes,
it has to be done. So thanks for joining us today. We're going to continue on with our wedding planning, right? Next week. All right.
Moving towards being a homeowner.
Yeah, so if you like the podcast, give us a share,
Please.
Give us a like, click the follow button. We appreciate it. Thanks for being on, and we'll see you next week.